Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Five Stripes Tonight. My name is Sydney Hunt from Dirty South Soccer at MLSsoccer.com, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Thursday, February 17th, 2022, the official first show of our second season. You may know that I did a little preseason episode with Joe Patrick a few weeks ago, but consider this the official launch of our second season. We started bit halfway or so through the 2021 season, but we are back. I want to say better than ever, but yeah, hopefully, hopefully it's a good year for us. Hopefully, a good year for Atlanta United too. But thanks for watching. Glad to have you on board. Hey, the chat is open. If you have any questions, comments, or anything related to Atlanta United throughout the show, be sure to hop in, and we'll be sure to answer those to the best of our ability. Like I said, Atlanta United is only just days away from kicking off their sixth season. It's hard to believe this is season 6 for Atlanta United. It seems just like yesterday when they were taking the field against the New York Red Bulls at Bobby Dodd Stadium in Midtown Atlanta. But on not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday, they'll be taking on Sporting Kansas City to kick off their sixth season of MLS play in front of what should be a sold-out Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So we are looking forward to that. Joining me is a longtime friend of the program and somebody that requires no introduction at all. Half of Five Stripe Final contributor to MLSsoccer.com and the guy that writes the newsletters that I'm sure you all subscribe to, the Daily Kickoff for MLSsoccer.com. Of course, Sam Jones. Sam, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sure everyone knows exactly who I am. I read the newsletter every day. Doesn't let it die in their inbox or anything like that. Glad to be here, though. Glad to be following up Joe. I'm hoping I can one-up him in a major way here.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I know I have a lot to live up to measure up to either of you guys, but I'll do my best. Tonight, like I said, we're going to talk a little about Atlanta United's upcoming season, give our general thoughts on what's going on. But I said MLS is back in 9 days, but some MLS teams, of course, already on the field tonight. And throughout this week, as CONCACAF Champions League has kicked off, NYCFC defeated Santos de Guapiles on the away to 0, so they're in good shape. Santos Laguna defeated CF Montreal on Tuesday night, so Montreal have a goal to nil deficit to make up. Third team in the field, Colorado Rapids. They take on Comunicaciones on the road tonight, going on right now as we come on the air. Seattle Sounders away to Motagua. And the fifth match involving the MLS team, Cavalier and New England Revolution. That tie is canceled, unfortunately, because Cavalier having some visa issues that prevented them from being able to participate in the proceedings. So 4 MLS teams still in the field right now, and 5, I should say, in the field in the fifth, having advanced to the next round by way of forfeit. As Colorado kicks off against Comunicaciones, really right now as we speak, what's your general impression of the CCL field?
I hate to be this person. Everyone's going to call me like, oh, he's just a shill for the mothership or whatever. But this is probably the year, maybe. Maybe if it's going to be any year, it's going to be next year, right? I think we can say that for every single year that it doesn't happen. But there is a sense that there is blood in the water for MLS teams in a way I don't think there has been, considering the teams in this competition, the top level players they have, the match winners they have, and then the depth that they have, right? These are teams with a lot of continuity in most places. Colorado is missing a few guys tonight, and we don't have to get into that on an Atlanta United show too much, but you look at New England, you look at NYCFC, you look at Seattle, and even Montreal is a team that has its spine together mostly, right? And they stayed with a very decent Santos team who's struggling a bit right now, but stayed with them the entire time and, survived until one of the very last moments when the Liga MX team did what Liga MX teams do against MLS teams that haven't played a game yet, right? Like it got late and you're like, okay, here comes the extremely trash goal out of nowhere, and they got it, right? But it was stealable for Montreal. There were moments when Georgia Mihailovic turned and there was Joaquin Torres or Romel Kyoto running into space in the half spaces trying to get behind guys, and there was a through ball that just didn't quite get through, right? That happened multiple times. One of those gets through, we could be talking about a very different thing. So if Montreal, a team that didn't make the playoffs in the East last year, is giving Liga MX teams fits, right? And the standard of competition for the other MLS teams is much, much higher. You have to feel pretty good about the way this sets up, especially for the teams on the side of the bracket where they're only having to deal with one Liga MX team until the final.
Yeah, we'll really touch on that high level because we want to get into some Lady United things, of course. Montreal, as you mentioned, losing last minute goal, 88th minute goal by Santos Laguna. Obviously not a deep deficit, very doable for Montreal. New York City in really good shape, 2-0 win away to Santos Iguaperes. They take those goals back to their home of California, which never mind. But CFC in good shape. All jokes aside, Colorado Rapids take out Comunicaciones right now as we speak. Seattle Sounders and Motagua, as we mentioned. Sounders. That'll be a tough match for the Sounders. I think that will be in no way, shape, or form a gimme for the Sounders. Just as Atlanta United a few years ago, and then the Revs again through to the next round by way of Cavaliers forfeiture due to visa issues. So NYCFC a good shape. Like I said, Montreal not in bad shape, but they do have a goal to make up. But yeah, it's always a tough ask for MLS sides, especially because the MA Keys are in season and MLS is not, and then we can go on and on about the gap between the two leagues. But yeah, that's how things shake out. And I'll be honest, I haven't really been watching it this week. I'll probably tune in, but I haven't been watching it thus far. But hopefully, I'll get into the swing of things.
This kind of brings it to me. Like, aren't you glad Atlanta United isn't having to deal with it right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Go down and go play Motagua or Comunicaciones, right? And just struggle with that and terrify everybody as they get thumped by a team in Guatemala.
Yeah,
right? I don't miss it. I'm not longing for it in any sense as an Atlanta United fan, right? And considering that this is a team that is integrating new pieces, is getting the first real look at what Gonzalo Pineda wants them to do in a first real offseason for him as a head coach, I'm really glad we're not.
I think we lost Sam. They're having a little connection issue, and we got him back actually. Remember that? Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry, I think you froze up for a second on my end, but yeah, you're just talking about this first full season of Gonzalo Pineda and how you're glad that Atlanta United aren't in Champions League this year. But I agree with you. I agree. It's time for them to really just decompress after last year, right? They went through three managers, 2 full-time managers. And if we include Valentino, 3 managers. So they're still kind of getting their feet underneath them, really conforming to the system of Gonzalo Pineda, who really makes a sense of calm. I forget who was talking about it yesterday. I think it was the Mouse of the South guys talking about, under Gonzalo Pineda, you look at Tata Martino, you look at De Boer, you look at Heinze, and to a greater extent, De Boer, Heinze, they came in with ego.
Their own unique charms. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. With Pineda, there's that sense of humility, there's that sense of calm, that sense of stability. He's not a big name, as the guys were talking about the other day. He's not this big time player. Sure, he had a respectable career, but when you look at him, he's a humble guy. Again, like I said, a sense of calm. And the big thing is he knows MLS. He's played in MLS, so he knows what this league is all about. So it really is. We've talked about it in the past, but it really does represent really a shift in philosophy for Atlanta United, where they would swing for the fences. Not so much in Tata Martino's case. I mean, granted, he coached Argentina, and
remember Tata came to them.
Yeah, Tata came to them, and we can argue that. I was going to say we could argue that Miggy came to Atlanta United because of Tata, not so much because of what the front office did. But that's a whole other topic we'll get into, of course. But when you look at De Boer, you look at Heinze, sort of the quote unquote big names struck out. And
Totally.
De Boer to a lesser extent than Heinze, but pretty much with Pineda, like I said, it really is a shift in philosophy. I'm excited to see how this club really takes on that philosophy here in its first full season.
Well, I mean, you kind of talk about Frank de Boer and Gabriel Heinze, and just from a social acumen perspective, Atlanta United has improved exponentially here with Gonzalo Pineda, and just how he treats people day to day, how comfortable
He won't kick
can
anyone. He won't kick anyone's grandmother.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a hard ass like Heinze.
No,
He
not at all.
can connect with players in a way that Frank de Boer couldn't and never really wanted to. It seemed like, and those things matter. Those things matter, and those things can build for the long term in a way that Frank and Gabby, who were clearly angling for bigger things, somehow Frank got it. Don't ask me how he got it, but it was a different dynamic, right? This is not the case. This is something that can be long term and something that really starts in earnest this year, because last year you'd call that a year zero, right? If you would even want to do that, you could say it was a year negative and a half. He only got half a year. He came in at a point where the team had just figured out how to win soccer games after Gabriel Heinze and said, I'm not going to rock the boat too much, right? I'm going to keep this relatively steady. And that was the correct choice. There wasn't enough time to make too many major overhauling decisions at that point. What happened, though, is, of course, teams figured that out, right? Like, okay, here is what Atlanta is. Here's what they can't do, which is score in any way that isn't in transition. And they really aren't even that good in transition if they don't beat three people on the dribble. So we know what they are. We know who they are. And if we have the talent to go up against them, which, obviously NYCFC did in the playoffs, and pretty much every other team above the playoff line did last year. Atlanta United only won one game against teams above the playoff line, right? They knew what Atlanta was. And so now the task for him this offseason is to throw something different at this, really connect the pieces in the way he wants to connect the pieces, and figure out how pieces like Thiago Almada and Ozzy Alonso fit into this for not only the short term, but maybe the long term in a couple of cases.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about Almada in a second here, but Justin saying huge fan of Gonzalo Pineda so far. I think he's great for the club and will be there for more than just 2 years. So it's another big thing. You don't get the sense with Pineda that he's looking for that next step upward. He's like a person that will be in MLS for the foreseeable future, and that's good for the stability of the club. By the way, Justin saying it's first time tuning in, either talking lady, and that's Justin. Thanks for tuning in. Glad you could be on board with us on Five Stripes tonight. So let's talk about. I said we'll talk about Almada a little later on, but let's kind of get into a player like a Luis Araujo. It's his first season with the club, his first full season with the club, his first full season to be able to sit under the leadership and guidance of Gonzalo Pineda, his first full season to really get a feel of what MLS is all about. And he's shown some promise in the few matches that we saw of him last year when he came over from Leo at the trade deadline. So really looking for what he does, looking forward to what he can bring to the table offensively, especially with Almada coming in on board. I guess we'll talk about Almada too in this case, but you have two really dynamic attacking players that you hope can kind of coalesce with Joseph Martinez, and not so much coalesce with him, but become those supplementary goal scorers, because that's something that Atlanta United have missed sorely. We saw when Joseph went down, you had nobody to put the ball into the back of the net. And one of the things that you hear about Almada is he kind of paraphrasing, he has a no sort of goal. He's not going to be a target striker. He's not going to score like 20, 30 goals a year. You don't need him to. He's certainly a 10. He's certainly an attacking midfielder, but he has that nose for goal in that you don't need Joseph all the time to score goals, while he'll be that player that able to carry the load, maybe to a lesser extent, of course, because of his age, which is kind of weird to think about, and still kind of getting into form after his ACL. But something that Atlanta's been missing, that attacking player that has a nose for the goal. We hope Barker would do it, but he didn't really live up to start to finish. Didn't really live up to the expectations. Had a good spell here with Atlanta, but not the spell that you'd expect for somebody that the club played so much for. And well, that's a whole other topic. But yeah, Arujo, Almada, two pieces that can really strengthen this attack if they're able to gel together and really coalesce, like I said, together with the pieces that are returning in Moreno and Joseph.
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of hit at something that we were just talking about, which was the inability of Atlanta to create moments beyond individual moments, to create these team goals that we saw a lot under Tata Martino, and to an extent under Frank, when the team was rebelling and pushing for what they wanted the team to be in the latter half of 2019. Right, those are the kind of goals we missed sorely last year. And when you have people, I'll start with Araujo. When you have people like him who are clearly a notch above when it comes to talent, and that's not just like a notch above replacement level in MLS, it's a notch above a lot of the really, really quality productive players in MLS. You see it pretty much anytime he's on the ball, right? You see it at practice. He's the best practice player I've ever seen going to training at Atlanta United. He's more impressive than Almiron. I'll say that straight up. Now, the question is, can he do it in games? And can the team facilitate to him in a way that keeps him from kind of getting lost in the shuffle? There were times last year, and I think this is probably the biggest gripe with him in his first year, as he kind of adjusted, he kind of disappeared at times, especially in the latter part of his first year, right? Where he really had to kind of find new solutions to questions that were being asked of not only him, but the entire team. And those solutions clearly weren't found, right? Yeah. So what can he do this year in a team that maybe has a more connective format, a more connective tissue from back to front? And if the answer is that he understands his role and knows how to be effective in it, this is an MVP caliber player, just based on talent alone, right? And then you can look at the numbers and see, 99th percentile in total shots last year per 90, right? Like, he's going to make things happen one way or another. And that is really, really exciting for not only the fact that you could have that MVP caliber player, but that he could be supplementary to Joseph, who, of course, we know is an MVP caliber player. We haven't had that since Tito, since Miguel, since those guys left, since really Julian, It's kind of crazy to think about. So if he's creating space because people are worried about him, if Joseph is creating space because his movement is back, then that opens space for Marcy, that opens space for Almada to create. And that's really, really exciting. Really, really exciting. Obviously, the other side of that is Almada. What is he going to be? Who is he? And what is his role within this team in an on-field perspective, right? The underlying numbers aren't phenomenal. The obvious caveat with that is he's 19 years old. I will say it's maybe not encouraging when you can put Diego Facundez's underlying numbers and then put Thiago Almada's underlying numbers up in a blind test, and people have a tough time picking out which player they'd rather have. That's not the most encouraging. But obviously the talent and pedigree is there. And my understanding is that this is a player who is further along than Barco was, and maybe ever has been, considering how he didn't really develop much at all until the very, very end in Atlanta. Right. This is a guy who has played 2,300 minutes last season, right? That was the total amount of minutes Barco had played his entire career before he came to Atlanta. Almada did that last year, right? And was a key part of the Velez team that, to my understanding, didn't function without him. He was out for a little bit because of the Olympics, and I think it was maybe 7-8 games. They scored twice. Just because he was gone, So can he be more than Zeke? Can he fit into all of this? And can he be productive in a way that you would expect of a $16 million designated player. I don't know. I'm not super confident in that. He may not have to be if Joseph and Louise and Marcy are really, really good. He maybe can sit back and take some time to adjust. It's going to take some time and be that extra player, right? That fourth option, the guy who can really be effective in transition where he seems to really, really excel.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull up, and you're talking about the amount of money that Atlanta United reportedly paid for Thiago Almada. Of course, Almada is the number one most expensive transfer in MLS history. Amount of money that you pay for a player doesn't always equate to results. And I mean, I'm sure it doesn't.
Right now.
Exactly. So I just pulled up the list that Tom Bogert actually tweeted a few days back. And Almada, of course, number one. PT Martinez, 15.5, number two. Barco, number three, 15 million. And PT, of course, we can go into him another time. Barco, we all know about him. Brenner, 13 million. Who, yeah. Pizarro, 12 million. And then Luis Araujo, 12 million. So, again, money paid doesn't always equate to results, like I said. And, of course, certainly for Brenner, the jury's still out. He's been disappointing thus far for the amount of money that since he paid for him. Pizarro, same deal. But again, like I respect that Lady United want to pay so much money to bring in players who they feel can really affect the team. But at the same time, you have to be mindful that you can't just throw money at the problem. Like I'm thinking of the New York Yankees. To some extent, the New York Yankees. I mean, you look at the New York Yankees, the amount of money they pay for players at times. Not so much these days, maybe as much as the previous ownership has paid. But I know it's kind of a weird analogy to use, but sometimes you can't throw money at the problem and expect to fix it. Now, if Almada pans out, of course, that's a wise investment, and Atlanta United will get a major return on that investment.
Right.
Well, I mean, when he goes to Europe.
Yeah, when you think about it, it is a relatively decent bet that even if he doesn't work out and recoup that money, the way that Aldosier came out of nowhere for like a Deus Ex Machina transfer for PT, right? Like he's mid at best. And then they come in with $17 million and you're like, okay, well, it was all a wash anyway, right? That's kind of the bet here, right? That he can progress and earn you a higher transfer fee than you paid for him, right? Or that you at least get some of that back, most of it back. It didn't quite happen with Zeke. I don't know if it's going to happen with Almada, but it's an interesting bet to make, especially for a front office that has faced a lot of criticism, right? To take a risk on a player who is going to take some time to develop, is going to take some time to adjust to a league that is exponentially getting better by the year, right? Seemingly by the month at this point.
Yeah.
It's going to take a moment. And considering everything else, the baggage that comes with Thiago Almada,
exactly.
Whatever your view is on that, it is part of the story. It is part of the fans' reaction to it. And it's part of the fans' understanding of where their expectations will be for him. If he starts really slow and he struggles and it is Ezequiel Barco part 2, that's going to be a major source of criticism. And it's an interesting risk to take for the front office, from my point of view anyway.
No, you're exactly right. You nailed it right on the head. And I think it's going to take a while for the fans to warm up to him.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know about the sexual assault case and everything involving that, but the gesture that he made on the field, that's going to take a lot for our fan base or the Atlanta United fan base to, I don't want to say look past, because that's something that you can't look past, but it's going to be tough for him to redeem himself. I think he's going to get some sideways glances during his first few weeks months on the field. And you exactly nailed it. You nailed it exactly on the head. If he starts slow, if he doesn't affect the team as he has been brought on in hopes of doing, it's not going to reflect well on the front office, as you said, that has had its share of stumbles over the past 6 to 12 months. So we'll see what happens with him. We'll see how he develops. And I think the onus is on really Pineda to help bring him along in MLS because, again, he knows what it's like to play in this league. He knows what it's like to coach in this league. So not just him, of course, but the players are already here in Atlanta.
And this is his first real test for doing that, right? Like this is the big project that he has been handed. And it is like he entered a chemistry 101 class and all of a sudden is having to, do something fancy in chemistry. I don't know what even that would be like, right? Yeah. It's a really, really difficult assignment in this case in particular. And for a first-year coach, I imagine that is made even more difficult, right? Just because of lack of experience. I'm extremely interested to see how he progresses and how he fits into this team because the worry is, right, that he is Ezequiel Barco with a slightly higher price tag and maybe better hair. I don't know. And more baggage, right?
Better hair than me. Better hair than
me. So, I mean, and if that's the case, then, man, it could be an interesting data point in how we assess the overall tenure of a lot of people. That being said, the ceiling for this team is high, right? This is still a team that could easily finish top 4, top 3, top 1 or 2 in the East. That window is open, considering that some of the best teams in the league are losing guys midseason or
New England
went off to another conference, right? Like Nashville's gone. There's space for Atlanta to fill, and with their ability in transition, right? With their talent in transition, with the way that Gonzalo Pineda is likely going to play, which is similar. Maybe sitting deeper than we're used to. Seeing an Atlanta United team, it could work out really well. All of this could coalesce really, really nicely because this team is extremely talented. It all depends on how the puzzle pieces fit and if Gonzalo Pineda can make it work, right? I don't know, but this could be a really, really good team.
Yeah. We mentioned Joseph Martinez a few times already, but let's talk about him now. And I mentioned a couple of things. Of course, we mentioned the ACL, but Joseph Martinez is going to be 29 years old in May, which is weird to think about, which isn't old per se in the grand scheme of things, but in the soccer world, that's kind of old-ish. Right. That's when you really kind of start to think about, what are my next 5 years look like? And Joseph Martinez, I mean, if he had his way, he'd play to his 48 if he could. I mean, he'd play on one leg if he could. But, Father Time is going to come knocking at the door. I mean, it sounds premature to think about, but he's had a major knee surgery. He's had a major knee injury. And it might be a little controversial to say, but fans may need to start getting used to Joseph Martinez not being the Joseph Martinez that we saw in 2017, in 2018. I don't think that it's unfair to say that specifically. I mean, he's a club legend. He will be a club legend long after he's gone. But I don't think it's unfair to say that, if you expect Joseph Martinez to go flying up and down the field, and he said, look, I want to win the Golden Boot this year. And he may well do so. But you're not going to get the Joseph Martinez that you got early in his career with Atlanta United. And I think fans really need to come to terms with that. What are your thoughts?
I think we're going to see a version closer to it than we saw last year for sure. It seems to be the second year back from ACL tear. It is kind of the year where you come back and say, okay, my body is working at a high level and I trust it. Right. Joseph talked a lot at the beginning of the year last year about learning to trust his knee again. And the danger with all of that is that you overcorrect and you tear the other one. You see it pretty commonly in ACL tears that you end up messing up your other knee because you're overcompensating for it, right? Your balance is off, everything like that. Joseph made it through that first year. He played 1,600 minutes, right, on that knee. I think he trusted at this point, and I think his movement is going to get there in a way that we didn't see last year, right? Is he going to look the same as 2017, 2018? No. I don't think he was going to look that way anyway as he continued to kind of get older. He was going to have to reinvent the way he scored goals, no matter what, right? Like that is going to have to happen. He was going to lose his hops eventually, right? Like he's not going to sky out the building like he did this first couple of years. And so it comes a little bit earlier for him than most, but even still last year, basically on one leg, Joseph Martinez, 12 goals, right? Golden Boot winner was Tati Castellanos with 19. He's 7 goals off the Golden Boot race,
interesting,
right? You know, so he's going to make that prediction, and he may not be far off, honestly. Especially again, like we talked about, if this team is able to attack and transition in a way that looks similar to Seattle under Brian Schmetzer and Gonzalo Pineda. It looks similar to what Tata Martina did. And it looks similar to all the ways we've seen Joseph Martinez be successful, which is, you know, getting on the end of early crosses and getting in the box and causing problems. If that comes back, if that version of Atlanta United comes back, we'll see a version of Joseph Martinez, I think, that looks pretty similar to us, right? I don't think it's crazy to put an over-under for his goals total scored this year. It's somewhere around like 15 and a half, 16 and a half. I would take the over. I think this is somewhere around an 18, 19, 20 goal year for Joseph. And if that's the case, then this is a home playoff team. If it's more than that and he's back to an MVP level, this is a team that can easily win a trophy or two.
Yeah, I was going to say about 20, a little less than 20. So definitely agree with you along that line of thinking. And that's the fear, you know, does he overcompensate, like you said? But I think it's tough. It's tough getting back from ACL. I mean, I've never had to do it myself, but yeah, it's tough. We've seen some players be able to do it, and some players have not been able to do it. And don't bet against Joseph Martinez is something that I've learned during his time in MLS. So if there's anybody that can really make the most of this and really bounce back from this, is a player like him. I want to talk about other players that we haven't spoken about beforehand. I'll be 100% honest. I haven't watched the preseason. I don't know how much you've watched, but we saw Justin ask what are players that have stood up to us in the preseason. So he said Luis Araujo, Almada, Josetu, Gutman. And Gutman is one who a lot of people will be taking a look at because, of course, he was on loan to Red Bull last year. But he's stepping in, presumably stepping in for George Bello. And it's going to be a key player to watch for Atlanta United. How do you figure that Gutman figures into the equation here in his first full season with the first team?
Yeah, this was a conversation me and Joe were having earlier in the year when George Bello was still here. Is Andrew Gutman going to start over George Bello? Is what we kind of kept asking, because at this point, Andrew Gutman is just a better player. He was really, really sharp for Red Bulls last season. If you look at his numbers, really, really solid from a fullback position. 97th percentile in receptions, 92nd in blocks, 96th percentile aerials, won a whole lot of green on his FB ref chart if you're looking for things like that. He gets in the box a lot. He makes things happen and is more effective in a way that Bello never quite figured out. Despite being very talented, he hadn't quite rounded into that kind of form yet. Obviously, Gutman older. I think he's about 25. 25, I'll turn 26 this year. This is a really solid player, and I think it's an upgrade. And I know people are going to kind of bristle at that because they love George. I love George. George is as bright and a thoughtful dude as you can come by in doing this. Gutman's better. Gutman's a better soccer player at this point. George can be better eventually. Gutman's better right now. And so that's an upgrade. That is one of the few positions I've kind of looked at for Atlanta United as an upgrade. And with the way this team will want to play, the way this team will want to push forward, with the way this team will want to be on the front foot. The fullbacks being effective will be a big part of that. And Gutman on one side and Brooks Lennon on the other. That's as good an attacking fullback pairing as any in the league, really. And that's exciting.
Yeah. So we talked kind of about the outside backs, center backs, of course. Miles is going to be Miles, and we won't spend too much time on the center backs. But Rossetto is a player that I think really has a chance to take a big step forward in 2022 because he'll have to build that chemistry. He'll be in a position to really build that chemistry with players up above him on the attack. I think how he develops with Luis Araujo will be key, of course, because with them being both Brazilian players, I feel that bond will kind of be important as the season progresses. But where do you see? I'm going to bring up another player. Elliot brought up Jacob Mulroney. Where do you see him? He scored a really good goal in preseason already, and I was thinking about Jake missed a few sitters in 2021, more than a few sitters. Where's a player like Jake figure into things this year?
Yeah, no, he's a good depth piece. For the salary he's on, it's about $250K. I think for his effectiveness level and for his role in the team, I think that's kind of exactly what you want if you're Atlanta United. You want to have someone who you can send on late at a game and have them be reliable, right? And I think Jake is going to give you a reliable kind of high floor depth performance anytime you put him out there. And that's important over the course of a season, right? Not everyone's going to stay healthy. There's going to be international stuff. There's going to be all sorts of things that kind of come into play. And for $250K for a solid winger who can be better, can be more effective with his final ball. I think he would admit that. I think he did admit that last year, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. He can be effective. He's quick. He can get by guys and make things happen. And I think that can be a really kind of critical piece for this Atlanta United team, who kind of have a decent tradition of that, right? With guys like Justin Meram and Tito and other people like that who've come in on the wing and done effective things off the bench.
Yeah. Another player I want to talk about, we haven't mentioned this, Ozzy Alonso, which I think he's not going to play a lot of minutes for Atlanta United, but I think he's such a critical signing as it pertains to bringing some of these younger players on. I mean, he's been in the league forever. He's won trophies. He's been very successful. He knows Gonzalo Pineda. He's played alongside him, played under him with Pineda as the assistant in Seattle. So I mentioned it as a Lorenowitz-esque signing, which it really is when you think about it. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that veteran player, that veteran presence who is able to get the job done, like Lorenowitz, I don't think, like I said, he'll play a lot of minutes, but it's a really strong veteran signing that I'm excited to see how he fits into this Atlanta United team. Again, under Gonzalo Pineda, who he knows very well.
Right. Yeah. No, it is Lorenowitz-esque, but Ozzy is objectively better and a better player within this league. Jeff is, you know my relationship with Jeff at this point, right?
Yes.
Ozzy is. I was just talking with Matt Doyle from Extra Time and the Mothership, and he called him the best defensive midfielder in league history. That was above Diego Chara. It's above a couple other guys as well. And this is a guy who, at age 32 last year, was really good for Minnesota. Kind of carried them, right? Age 36, whatever it was. He's old, y'all. He's really, really old, but he played a relatively significant amount of minutes. And, that's something we may see to some extent for Atlanta United. I think we're going to see him play somewhere around 1,500 minutes. He played 1,400 last year for Minnesota United. He kind of checked in and took a couple starting spots from guys, which was really impressive. Again, age 36, coming into a team that was a playoff team and really being a focal point for them. He's still got it. And the way Gonzalo talks about him is really encouraging. It really is. He obviously has that trust with them. The players obviously respect him. There's kind of the famous-ish story now of him telling Jackson Conway to take his hat off while he was inside, which is incredibly dad of him. Almost too much. I thought it was kind of weird, but whatever. It's something that has been missing to some extent from Atlanta United, especially on field, for them to have a guy who they can trust, who they can look to and say, okay, Ozzy is pressing, I need to press too.
Yeah.
Right. Ozzy is dropping back, I need to drop back too and change the tempo of this game. Right. And for guys like Santiago Sosa and Franco Ibarra who are learning how to play midfield at a consistent level with consistent minutes, that's huge. That's really huge. On top of getting a very, very good player, it's a very locker room guy. It is a really kind of critical piece to Atlanta United's success. And I thought Matt Doyle summed this up well when he said that Ozzy won't play the majority of the minutes this year in midfield for Atlanta United, but I bet he's going to play a lot of the critical ones. You know? And I think that's the kind of player we're getting. We really are. I thought it was interesting the other day Gonzalo Pineda was talking about the team pressing and how he wanted that to be triggered and who he wanted to be leading that. And he pointed to Ozzy Alonso as the guy who was cueing everyone on when to press and when to go forward and when to push. And I think that's huge, right? That's again, the kind of player they've been missing. So I'm excited about Ozzy. If he can fill that Larunowicz void in my heart, then even better, right? This is a really good player, and it's the best signing of the offseason for Atlanta United, considering that he's going to be on a league minimum, right? He's not going to be taking a ton of cap space, but he's going to give out a ton of output when he's on.
Yeah, I would say two things. Number one, I agree with Justin. Strong leadership signing. Justin was saying in the chat, spell Sosa until he can get back. Plus, fill in during the Open Cup. So definitely agree with that, Justin. But I will say too, we should say old in soccer years because he's actually a year younger than me. I turned 38 this year, so we should say old in soccer years. Old in soccer years. But another signing, and we'll probably wrap up here in a few minutes. But before we do, another signing that hasn't been announced but has been rumored is Dom Dwyer. I know some fans were up in arms because he played for Orlando or whatever, which I guess I can understand. But I mean, Dwyer's not the first player to go to a rival club in MLS history. It's happened before. But reports from Jamie Watson from the National SC broadcast team, 2-year deal, 2-year guaranteed deal, which, I mean, we don't know the numbers, of course, but
Right.
we don't know the numbers. We don't know how much it will be. But I mean, you could do a lot worse. You could do a lot worse.
It would frankly be tough at this point, considering his output over the last couple of years.
Right. I mean, he can't stay off the injury list. But
yeah,
I mean,
that's true too. And when he's on, he just hasn't been good.
No, you're right.
Percentile non-penalty XG, a whole lot of other very bad numbers. First percentile in passes attempted per 90, fifth percentile in touches in the attacking penalty area. There's not a whole lot of good to report here. He could be a veteran guy. I don't know how much they really need to stock up on that at this point, but it seems like they're kind of intent on doing that. And maybe he can be a mentor to someone like Jackson Conway, not Jackson Conway. New nickname, maybe.
Yeah.
God, that was a terrible slip. I don't know what I was thinking about that. But not the most exciting signing in the world. He could maybe round into form a little bit because we know he can be productive when he's healthy and on. That just hasn't been the case over the last few years. It just hasn't. So hopefully a league minimum kind of guy, and hopefully a guy that doesn't see the field a ton over more interesting prospects like Jackson Conway or Luca Martinez Dupuy, who I think can play as a striker as well and seems to potentially be on his way as a U22 signing.
Yeah, and again, we'll have to see the numbers, but like you're saying, maybe nothing more than a veteran signing. And like I said, you could do a lot worse, but you could do a lot better too. And Dupuy, of course, Martinez Dupuy is a player that probably closer to that backup striker role at this point. But um, let's see. Red card fodder, says Cabos. I don't know about that. I was just playing in the last 5 minutes of every match and deploy the player to attack an opposing player. Um, I kind of had a theory, and I won't spend too much time on it. I kind of had a theory that maybe Dom asked to come to Atlanta to be closer to his family. I mean, of course, fortunately, and Sydney LaRue, U.S. women's soccer team, U.S. women's national, unfortunately divorced recently, and she's still in Orlando. I'm assuming the kids are still in there, so I'm assuming maybe this is a move that he asked for to be closer to them without being actually in Orlando. It's just a theory, but I don't know. But yeah, we'll see again what the money is involving that. Um, let's wrap up and talk about your overall expectations. I know you said it could be a season where they finish like third, fourth, fifth. It could be a season where they could challenge for trophies and maybe win a few trophies, considering the way the East looks. Um, I'll say reasonable expectation for this club should be there shouldn't be any reason for them to not finish at worst top four in the Eastern Conference. Yeah. That should be a reasonable expectation. Anything below that is really a disappointment for a club that says, hey, we want to be one of the big clubs in the world. We want to win trophies. They talk, they've mentioned all of this all the time. And big clubs don't finish fourth in the league or fifth in the conference. Big clubs, play big games. They show up in big games. They have big performances. They win trophies. And I think this is a team that can win trophies, even if it's maybe an Open Cup this year. But I think their sights should be much higher than that. And they should at least challenge, like I said, in the top four. And if everything comes together, like you were saying, I definitely agree that this is a club that can make a push for a league championship or maybe a supporter shield or something of that regard. What are your thoughts, kind of?
Yeah, I think the floor is relatively high. I don't see this as a year where the team bottoms out like they did under Gabby or they did under Frank, right? The chemistry is there, the locker room cohesion is there in a way, especially at the top, that of course Gabby and Frank never could have. So I don't see this bottoming out in that way. I don't see the talent level is low enough for that to happen. It's so high. And if this team can put it together, they can be so excellent, right? Will that happen? I'm not convinced because, frankly, I'm not convinced on Thiago Almada's fit into this. I don't know if he's going to put up the kind of numbers that and really be effective in the way that we're hoping his first year. I'm having issues seeing it. It may come later in the year. And of course, at that point, if you're fighting for a home playoff spot and you're in MLS Cup playoffs, anything can happen at that point, right? This team will have the talent and the ability to make a push come playoff time, right? It just depends on who's healthy and what kind of level of pragmatism and what kind of level of effectiveness they can find before that. Overall for the season, though, this is a playoff team. I picked them fourth. I think there are three teams pretty definitively better than them at this point. Philadelphia, NYCFC, and New England, all better and probably better over the long term, even with New England and New York losing a couple guys this summer, most likely. I think they have a better understanding of what they want to do, how they want to do it, and how they can execute it. Atlanta's just not there yet. Next year, though, they're probably one of those teams. Anything else this year is probably a cherry on top, right? It's some really decent performances and everything like that are going to be really, really encouraging. And maybe it ends up in a trophy. I'm never going to put that expectation on any MLS team. If you ask me if any MLS team is going to win anything, I'm going to say no, just based on the fact that it's really hard to win things in this league. But this is a playoff team, and I think a home playoff team. I'm like 60% sure.
Yeah, a lot of viewers in the chat giving their thoughts. Elliot saying, I won the Shield this year. let's go Ducks 96, sharing your sentiment on the way for first round of the playoffs, deep Open Cup run. Saying also adding, Pineda winning the Open Cup as a coach and player. We'll have to check on that. He's certainly winning as a coach, saying he feels he pushed hard for that. And then Justin saying, battle for the Supporter Shield, Open Cup, make top 4 in the East easily. This is what they can do in the playoffs for the Cup. Really talented team. And also saying he doesn't want to play another playoff game at NYCFC on their small little league pitch. NYCFC again headed to their home away from home in California for the second leg of Champions League next week, which is what we all expected, of course, because City Football Club can't get it together with the city of New York and build NYCFC a stadium. But that's another topic for another time. Sam, I would say tell us where to find you, but we already know you've been on the show a number of times. You're everywhere. People can find you MLSsoccer.com, 5 Strike Final, etc. Always fun to have you on, man, and we will talk to you sometime soon in the future, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sydney.
Thanks, Sam Jones from MLSsoccer.com, and of course, 5 Strike Final. Be sure to download it on your favorite podcatcher. That's it for me. That's it for this edition of 5 Strikes Tonight. Looking forward to a great season doing this. Thank you all for watching. Whether it's your first time or more than your first time, thanks for tuning in. You can find me, of course, on Twitter, SHWright, SHWRITS. And, of course, for the latest LA United news, analysis, and opinion, log on to DirtySouthSoccer.com, SB Nation's home for all things LA United. Again, my name is Sydney Hunt. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on another edition of 5 Strikes Tonight. So long, everyone.